Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Alliant webinar on the Day of GAD, which is fantastic. Today, we are going to be talking about the future of artificial intelligence and accessibility. Now, before we get started, my name is Scott Williams. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Alliant. I will be your moderator today. I highly suggest everyone ask as many questions you would like through the chat tool. We will try to get to as many as we can. Just so everyone's aware, we have well over 1,000 registrants today, so there's a lot of people on this webinar, so it's just making sure that we can get to everyone's questions. If we don't get to your question, we will still absolutely be answering it via email after the event as well, so please don't think that you'll be left out in any way. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I just wanted to point out one thing very quickly as well, is that today is our first GAD celebration as Alliant. It is a milestone for us. The three companies that make up Alliant, being our legacy brands of T-Base, Common Look, and Accessibility 360, obviously have been around for years, if not decades. We came together years ago now as a single entity, but the new brand Alliant just launched last year. So this is really nice to be celebrating this under the one brand, the one umbrella. We very much appreciate everybody joining us today. So thank you very much. And let's get started. So we're very lucky. Today we have amazing presenters with us. Mr. Faraz El-Reyes, our Chief Technology Officer and an AI specialist himself. We have Mr. Aaron Page, our Director of Accessibility from Alliant, and knows just about everything that it has to know about accessibility and accessibility software and technologies. And an outsider today, if you would call him that, but a very good friend of ours, Mr. Peter Pacchu, who is a director and cybersecurity expert at Cycura, a company out of Canada. So we've got very different perspectives today. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. I'm going to set the stage today just so everyone knows what we're going to be covering. When it comes to AI, we often say the future is here. I think just even in the last few months with certain chat XYZ programs, I will call it out there, that it's definitely becoming commonplace. And artificial intelligence is, I think, being categorized for a lot of people as the next big thing. It's one of those things that it promises a lot. Those promises really are about solving the majority of accessibility and compliance challenges, perhaps in one fell swoop, and we're going to be discussing that if that is actually the reality today. But AI, we also want to make sure that everyone knows that it's not an absolute. There's no straightforward answer in addressing if it's right for you, your company, your corporate environment, or what even to choose in that sense. So we're going to be discussing a lot of that today. Now, as we get into the meat of it today, obviously it is welcome to the machine. I think a lot of people look at AI, the jokes that we even have internally at times is that we welcome our new machine overlords in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people also contemplate whether or not does it replace people, help people, what does it do in a corporate environment? And I think there is a fear factor in many ways in replacing human beings. It also begs the question of why people gravitate towards AI. It really is about scalability, and we are going to be discussing aspects of that today. And it's, and people gravitate towards it. Obviously, look, when it comes to accessibility, there are literally billions of video hours, docs, statements being created every day. There is just so much out there. And I actually just pulled some stats just to put things into perspective. The amount of data in the world was estimated to be 44 zettabytes at the dawn of 2020. So, you think 3 years ago, by 2025, the amount of data generated each day is expected to reach 463 exabytes globally. And by 2030, 9 out of every 10 people aged 6 and above will be digitally active. So I think that puts into perspective just, the amount of content that's generated, the amount of content that is being experienced by people through technology. And this brings us to this cautionary tale that we're going to talk about today, which is, this has to be ethical when we look at AI in general. And more so than that, it's, the decisions around AI really need to be split into kind of two categories. It's about individuals, obviously, and it's always about people, and also just how that impacts the corporate environment. So as we jump into this today, Aaron, I'm going to go to you first on this one. AI and assisted technology. So, what purposes really will it serve? And if you wouldn't mind just giving the listening audience a little bit of your background, how you use assisted technology, and where you see the future starting to progress as we move forward.
Hey there, Scott. Thank you for that. As somebody who is blind, I use assistive technologies on a daily basis. And I think, as you point out, accessibility is at the heart of it. It is about people. It is about, can people actually access and use the content? Can they access your website, access your document, access your mobile application? And so it's really important to think about what are the actual technologies, assistive technologies, or just technologies in general, that these users are going to be using when they interact with your content and your website. In terms of artificial intelligence, it's very exciting to see a lot of the developments that are happening on this front. It is obviously still very much early days in many ways, but already you can see some really exciting AI-based features and functionality being rolled out into both assistive technologies and just devices in general. Two examples here that I'll highlight are Microsoft Seeing AI. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, this is a free application provided on iOS that any user can go and download. It's developed by Microsoft, and it has a lot of traditional assistive technology features, such as currency identification, optical character recognition, color identification as well. They also, though, have been rolling out a lot of new features and functionality as well, which are powered by AI. Including the ability to import pictures into the app and have it automatically generate descriptions of the photos. So say you encounter an unlabeled photo on the web, you can import it into Seeing AI and it will generate a description for you. It also has the ability to identify scenes and objects around you. You can actually take a photo of an object and it will describe it to you, identify what the object is. Or identify people. It can actually learn to recognize people. You can train it on who your friends are, and it will actually tell you who a person is if you point the camera at it. So some really amazing AI-based features in that assistive technology app, Microsoft Seeing AI. And then just at the device level itself with Apple and iOS, you see them integrating a lot of this functionality into the operating system itself. So for example, Apple now has automatic image description generation at the operating system level as well. They also are rolling out augmented reality features, such as being able to identify doors and similarly identifying objects as well. So really amazing advances happening now, and I'm sure in the future to come as it pertains to the assistive technology apps and devices that people are using.
One of the things that also comes up in a lot of conversation, obviously, is that you mentioned, Aaron, the side of things that has to do with the individual, but there's also the accessibility at scale. And that is really the idea of creating, the communications of all types for everyone all the time. For us, I'm going to pass this one to you, is that when we look at accelerating the production of accessible communications, how does AI play a role in that going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I think in order to understand why achieving accessibility at scale is an issue, we have to take a step back to understand how documents are made accessible. The workflow typically involves ensuring documents are structured correctly, providing alternative text for non-textual elements, so alternative text for images, captions for audio tracks, etc., ensuring color contrast guidelines are met, and so on. Now, this historically was done by humans, and it's a very involved process that takes a long time, causing a problem with scale, and also creating a backlog. Now, AI can help structuring documents, providing alternative text, and other things, making the scale issue more achievable, Scott.
So this is an interesting topic because it's when we look at the cross between AI, making it about people, I think there's a lot of concern, I would call it, about humans being replaced, and what happens to human contact. And I think that's maybe sometimes a lot of the fear that goes along with AI as well. Aaron, in your opinion, what are are your thoughts on the concepts of humans being replaced, and more so, are they going to be replaced, or is it going to make human interaction better? Is it going to be more focused? How do you kind of view the future in that sense of if you had a crystal ball in front of you in the predicting what's going to happen?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Scott. You know, in my opinion, accessibility is again about people. It's about whether or not people can use your site and your app and your devices. And no matter what, with people being at the heart of it, you're never going to be able to take people completely out of the equation. I do believe that artificial intelligence is going to make many of our accessibility related workflows and tasks much more efficient. So it will certainly save a lot of time. It will make people a lot more efficient. It will help solve problems related to that accessibility at scale. But ultimately, you are still going to have people there in order to truly know and understand whether or not something is usable for them. You know, just a couple of examples about this. One example is Be My Eyes, for those of you who are not familiar with it. This is another assistive technology app that is out there. And traditionally, the way that Be My Eyes has worked is that it connected sighted volunteers to blind or low vision users, and established a video call between the two so that the sighted volunteer could provide visual assistance to the blind or low vision user. And so incredibly useful service, free. And one of the things that they are actually rolling out now, I had the opportunity to hear a demo of this just recently, is an AI-powered virtual assistant that they call it. And in the demonstration that I heard, it actually showed them using this AI-powered virtual assistant to read out a Spanish restaurant menu. And it was amazing how, compared to standard optical character recognition, which essentially just gives you a text dump of information and you have to read it all, this virtual assistant tool actually organized it. So it identified it as a menu for a Spanish restaurant. It identified the categories, prompted you which one you wanted to hear more about, rather than just dumping all the information at you all at once. But an important thing to note is that all the while you are doing this and using the virtual assistant feature, there is a button right there to immediately connect you with that sighted volunteer. So that feature and functionality is still there, because there are going to be scenarios where it's not going to work. The content is going to be unusual. The AI is not going to know what to make of it. And so while it is a powerful tool, maybe some users might prefer it because of the perceived privacy of not having to share their information with a person. Whether it's more secure, I think Peter is going to talk more about later on in our track here. But it is certainly a great tool in terms of efficiency. The other thing that I will mention is around automatic captioning. AI is a big buzzword. We've started talking so much about it in the last year or two. But automatic captioning is something that has been around for quite some time. And despite how long it has been around and how many vendors there are in the space and how robust the technology has become, you still need human reviewers to review your captions in order to ensure they're of sufficient quality to meet DCMP and other kind of captioning guidelines and standards. So even though this technology is pretty mature at this point, it's been around for a while, it's very well developed, it still has not completely eliminated humans from the equation. It has made them more efficient, but it hasn't really replaced them.
You've given two examples, one just clicking a button to be able to connect to somebody, and then the one you just gave is, for us, a question for you on this, because this has to do with, I would call it the technology side. Do you feel that AI workflows, again, like not replacing humans, what is your opinion on how AI may or may not better focus, I will call it the human interactive aspects to specifics rather than generalizations?
Yeah, I believe that with the current state of AI, humans cannot be completely replaced. But I would say that humans will need to refocus their energies on specific tasks. So humans can be more on the QA side of the process. Let's take the alternative text example. It's very possible for AI to be able to provide a very accurate description of, say, a bar chart or a pie chart. But to determine whether something is decorative or not, and requires description or not, might be a more challenging and more suited to a human rather than a machine. Scott?
Yeah, so no, and thank you for that, because this is actually the perfect segue. I think just the way you answer that is to actually now talk about some of the impacts of AI-based workflows, because there are certain implications on AI and remediation and all those kind of things. I, I I think first and foremost, and we want to cover the gamut today of all the different types of communications. For us, I'm gonna ask you about this one. Is that from how do you see AI impacting the creation of Braille and reflowed large print? I know that for many out there in the corporate world on our webinar today, they're I'm sure asking the questions like, is it faster? Is it cheaper? But is it better? And I think those are where again the decisions have to be made both about the people that are going to experience this as well as obviously the business implications.
Yeah. So probably the answer is yes, yes, and yes. Right? Once a document is structured correctly and made accessible, it will be much easier to convert it into Braille or reflowed large print. Right? So it is going to be faster, it is going to be cheaper and better. But since AI can definitely speed up and reduce the cost of making documents accessible, it can impact producing Braille and large print at the same way. AI can also help with generating tactile images, selecting from the different ways to represent a table, and so on. Scott?
Do you think in that particular case, because I know that there's and we are going to be getting into this later as well, but just to set the stage for now is that there's obviously the generating documents using AI, for instance, on I'll call it personal level, the person that's sitting in the office at the desk that needs to create something that can be then, converted to Braille or reflowed large print. And then there's also I'll call it the workflow scenario of sort of the en masse stuff as well. Do you see how do I put this? A large gap between the individual and more of the corporate stance, or do you see those coming together as one, either in the short term or maybe in the longer term?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Scott. Sorry.
Well, sure. So let me just rephrase it. As everyone is obviously dedicated to creating accessible documents. Again, like we mentioned at the beginning, we have ChatGPT, those kinds of things that people are using every day to even just create content, those kind of things. That's on an individual basis. And I think there's a speed to which people can create accessible documents now, even for instance, like a lot of our common look software, for instance, right, is that those documents can be made, PDFs can be made accessible, even from a Braille and reflowed large print. Our CL Online tool does that today and can help people convert to those types of file types. I guess the question then becomes is that because that is happening now, how do you see it progressing on a corporate level as en masse corporations being able to create the best of all worlds, which is the individuals creating documents as well as the corporation as a whole creating things like statements and those kind of things. Do you think AI is going to play a large role in that sooner, or do you think it'll take a while to get there?
Yeah, so I guess this is the topic for the next slide. And yes, I believe it will. And there are many solutions out there, but I can speak to Common Look AI since I was involved in developing it. Common Look AI is a tool that learns PDF tagging from well-tagged PDF documents, similar to the one that you are trying to tag. Now, once it has learned how to tag, it's able to tag thousands and thousands of similar documents with high accuracy. Common Look AI can either be set up as a layer in between the existing PDF generating solution and the client. So clients can get an accessible document in real time, or you can send it batches of documents to handle your backlog issues. So yes, it will change the way that we create accessible digital communication.
Would you mind just elaborating on the real-time aspect? Because I think that's going to be an important one for the listeners today, is that I think a lot of the times when we look at, and I mean we as in like the world looks at accessible documents, especially like, backlog, those kinds of things, or just, again, a lot of documents, as we said at the beginning, it's like when you get into so many, terabytes, zettabytes, those kind of things.
Yeah.
The real-time aspect is intriguing because I know that like the conversations obviously we have internally about this, but explain to them what real-time means, because that's a right here, right now scenario that actually can positively impact the world, and those that require accessible documents where companies maybe don't have to worry as much about the management of going back in time and trying to do, mass batches at a time.
Yeah, so this is again about placing a layer in between the existing PDF generation software. So say your document is generated based on dynamic criteria that you can provide, or you just don't want to attack your entire backlog in one go. So you basically place this layer in between. So whenever a file is requested, this is when the solution that we have, for example, a solution like Common Look AI, would then make that document accessible. So it's basically an accessibility on a per needed basis, as opposed to just going back to your backlog and making it all accessible, regardless of whether these documents will be requested or they are just ancient documents that no one is asking for. So it's a matter of prioritization.
That does change the dynamic though, right? And I think, again, if we go back to the very first, slides that we were talking about, there's some of the fear and uncertainty around AI, perhaps in just even project size and implementation. It is that type of solution that does make it far easier for both, the corporation to tackle things because it is a real-time scenario, as well as making sure that, again, I'm just going to keep going back to the fact that it's about people, is that we are, addressing as a world the needs of those that do need accessible documents in real time. We talk a lot about that as far as access to, and I know that a lot of those things come to the web. And Aaron, I know this is your world. You live in web accessibility and the world of digital accessibility auditing. Will AI be able to, and I'm going to use air quotes when I say this here, is fix websites?
Thank you for that question. The short answer is, on its own, no. Just as we said, accessibility is about people. It's not going to be able to fully take people out of the equation and make that call whether a site is truly usable completely on its own. That being said, it is going to make people more efficient. It's going to be able to help a great deal, especially when you compare it to current automated scanning solutions that are out there. Most accessibility subject matter experts, if you ask them, will tell you that current automated scanning solutions find somewhere between a quarter and a third of accessibility issues on a website, and they produce a lot of false positives and a lot of noise along the way just to get you between a quarter and a third of the results that you happen to need. And a big part of the reason why it fails like this is because it can't handle interactivity and it can't understand context. So, for example, if you have a shopping cart button and you toggle the button and a shopping cart appears on the page, automated scanning solutions right now aren't usually able to perform that action of toggling that cart button, making the determination this is a dialog box that has appeared, and providing the necessary remediation steps for that. Most of the work that we do in digital accessibility is about identifying patterns like this, recognizing this is the nav menu. This is the type of nav menu. You've decided to use a simple nav or a mega menu. This is a modal. This is a carousel. Identifying those patterns and applying accessibility best practices to them. And AI, I do think, is going to be able to learn to identify those patterns and make those recommendations. But that is not everything. Developers, marketers, executives are always kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of innovation, new features, new functionality, new ways of presenting things. And these new innovative solutions, they aren't going to fit into the patterns that these artificial intelligence and automated scanning solutions are familiar with. And that is really where you're going to need that accessibility subject matter expertise still, and that kind of manual user testing.
To that point, though, it's like, and we did mention this before, is that those AI-based workflows will hopefully be able to focus the people in the background, that have to inspect all the different types of elements of web and the like, to maybe focus a little more on what's important, and to use even one of your own terms there is kind of cutting past the noise of just the rest of the job that they have to do every day, right? If they can get something that can identify those patterns and then move on to, I don't even want to say more important things, but I think it's more tangible aspects that truly do need that personal interactivity to fix. Is that
right?
Is that fair in saying that?
I would say so. Yes. It's going to really help at scale with identifying across massive websites, lots of pages, lots of documents, identifying those patterns and recommending those necessary solutions. And it'll allow accessibility subject matter experts like myself and my team here at Alliant to be able to focus in on that 10-20% of cutting edge and innovative content where you're trying new things out, and it's going to require some creative thinking and solutioning in order to ensure that that content is accessible and usable to everybody.
Perfect. We're going to move on to the next topic. Peter, I know that you've been waiting in the wings on this one, and we brought you in for a reason. Security is obviously a major concern for everything. Put accessibility even aside. We talk about all of this data being created. There are things like account numbers. There are things like personal information regarding medical records, all of these things. And I think the general public, one, has to understand what AI is capable of doing and not doing when it comes to security, as well as in a corporate environment as well, is that making sure that things are locked down just for general security hygiene is always important. So let me ask you this, Peter, is that, first of all, is AI truly smart enough to keep information safe? I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you.
It's a two-letter answer. No, well, I think, when we think about AI, especially today, we got to think about this as a pretty fast-moving industry, and some of the standards around what this will look like in the future aren't set today, including how your data is protected. So I think a good example here, I'd like to actually bring up two examples. So one, first and foremost, everyone's been talking about ChatGPT as they're the forefront when it comes to AI. There was a bug in ChatGPT not too long ago where it allowed, any user's type of data that you had saved. So when you use ChatGPT on the left-hand side, all your queries are kind of saved. And some open source library allowed for those exchanges from one user to end up in another user's account. So what that meant is I could see what you had typed into ChatGPT, and what I had typed into ChatGPT might have ended up in your account. So we've already seen a glitch where it shows it's not completely 100% safe. Furthermore, as people started rushing to use the platform, what we found out was there was a leak in Samsung, which caused them to kind of ban ChatGPT, and ChatGPT responded back with some new changes to their policies. So what ended up happening was, an employee in ChatGPT, specifically in their semiconductor division, where the engineers there started using ChatGPT to help them check some of their coding and their source code. And what ended up happening was they allowed some of their proprietary code to end up in ChatGPT, and now it's all over the internet. So that caused Samsung to respond with banning ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT responded by allowing a provision to kind of close off the environment and run private environments for these enterprise type solutions. So that highlights kind of two things. One is that your data is never 100% safe. And two, that this is a very fast moving space, and we'll see a lot of changes over the next 12, 24 months as people start using, integrating, and developing these tools for a multiple of different reasons.
Is there a cautionary tale here, I suppose, in that, like, as you said, I mean, people being able to see, each other's queries, those kind of things is one thing. There's also practices where, for instance, I receive a bank statement, a digital one, and I copy and paste that into ChatGPT for whatever reason, like, obviously, like, we're talking about accessibility today, but just again, let's talk about just data as data first, what happens to that data then, right? Is that, like, as much as you copy and paste it into this, call it third-party engine, where does it go? Obviously, it can be accessed by somebody other than you. I think, like, that, if you could explain to the listening audience where it's the things like ChatGPT is not just you looking at a screen in a way that is, an information as far as, like, the way you perceive it, I will say, right, is that my bank account number is my bank account number. But if I place my bank account number into a third party scenario, where does that, number go and who has access to it?
I mean, that's the billion-dollar question. I think, AI aside, if you zoom out and you look at these tools that help, either be by voice or by some other fashion, they rely on vast amounts of personal data, which raises a lot of concerns around privacy, around potential misuse and unauthorized access. And so, today it might be just ChatGPT, but tomorrow there's going to be a bunch of players in this space, each of them having their own different set of security policies and different ways of protecting this information. And so, like, let's take something very simple, like a voice assistant. In the future with AI powered voice assistants, because voice assistants, exist today. You got Siri, you got Google Home, but AI powered voice assistants may need to collect and process personal data, including sensitive health information, to function properly. For instance, let's say a visually impaired person might ask their voice assistant for help for reading and responding to personal emails, and the AI needs to process sensitive personal data. How that data is secured by that vendor, it's going to be different from vendor to vendor, and there is a possibility, obviously, and we'll see these happen over time. If that data is not properly secured, that sort of data is going to be susceptible to breaches or misuse. Beyond the fact that most of this data going into these large AIs or ML systems, they learn and train off this set of data, so it is accessible from a third-party perspective.
So this is going to bring us into, I think, the next topic that, so many people, I'm sure, at this point are thinking to themselves, okay, we're starting to get into, the complicated. We're talking about, obviously workflows, people, how do we choose, right? And if we look at AI in this sense, I mean, for everything that we've discussed thus far, and for us, I'm going to ask you this, is that, I mean, is AI overpromising, or is the perception just that maybe AI is overpromising? And, is there a delineation in what people should be aware of what AI can and obviously, more importantly, can't do for people?
Yeah, sorry. So we go back to that replacing humans topic here. I believe that there are items that a generic AI model is unable to deal with, right? Determining what is decorative as opposed to what is real content is something that is more problematic to achieve generically, right? So having a generic model to handle all your documents is probably an overpromise. Scott.
So if it is overpromising in the sense of, and again, going back to how you choose, right, is that it comes back to, I'm assuming, the right workflow for your business application in the sense of what you want to accomplish, and not so much, I would say, and I don't know, is it correct to say that, again, AI is not the end-all, be-all solution to everything? It really does come down to choosing the right scenario, the right workflow that is applied to your company. Is that really the gist of it?
Yes, and also the fact that generic models are less accurate than specific models, right? Just like anything else. Like if you're a specialist, you're better able to handle a certain scenario, right? Rather than somebody who deals with the topic generically. So if your model is built on just to handle any scenario, the accuracy would be much lower than a model that is built to handle a specific scenario.
Right. And again, that comes, brings it back to people. People still exist. We have to look at it that way, is that people aren't going anywhere. And I think a lot of the times too is that, Aaron, I'm going to direct this one at you. The way that people tend to, I think, just react to new technology in a lot of ways is that, again, we've used the term, the end all be all, those types of things. Technology, regardless of what it is, at the end of the day, is about making sure that it's solving challenges for people. It does take accessibility out of it for a moment. I mean, finance software exists because people didn't want to do it by hand anymore. It's all these kind of things. And I think is that we progress through time and seeing new things be introduced. It always is about including people in the process. So it's like, if you could give me just, your thoughts on that side of things, because there's also the legal aspects of this as well as that we've discussed, and even offline as far as what drives accessibility at times. Is it just a compliance checklist? Is it the fact that somebody got a legal notice, whatever it may be? So how do people, I guess, weave themselves into that narrative and stay there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question and topic. In the digital space in particular, we've really struggled with this, and it kind of comes back to what you were just talking about as it relates to false promises. And not naming any names, but certainly overlay tools as a generic category are a suite of software where we've really seen this problem of kind of false promises and over promises, and creating a perception that your site is accessible when in fact users can't actually go to it and use your site. And to such an extent that we've actually seen the community developing things like browser extensions and plugins to circumvent these overlay tools, because they are actually creating a negative experience from an accessibility and a usability standpoint. They're getting in the user's way. A simple
describe that for us, by the way, and sorry to interrupt, Aaron. It's just like, I think one of the things to look, and I admittedly myself, when I first came on board as to work with this company and understanding what accessibility truly meant, I think a lot of the times just people don't know what they don't know, and it does come down to the human experience. Would you mind just like explaining what that experience is as somebody that uses assistive technology? Because I think sometimes people don't understand because they just never used it or had that experience themselves.
Yeah, no, I certainly can. So, with overlays, for example, I myself, I use screen reading software. I use job access with speech and non-visual desktop access, and these are the screen readers that I use to boot up my computer and to log into Windows and open up Chrome and navigate to websites and to do everything on my computer. I am using these. But there are tools out there that purport to install our tool, and we will make your site accessible, and we will provide tools that the user can use to access the website, and essentially forcing me as a user who already uses a screen reader. I'm trained on JAWS. I know how to use it. I have it installed on my computer. I'm using it for everything. I now get to this one individual site, and all of a sudden I have to use the assistive tool that is provided on the site. Otherwise, it won't work. It breaks for me. At best, these things are redundant, but at worst, they can really harm the experience, because either if I try to use my own assistive technology, it won't work, or I'm forced to have to learn an entirely new assistive technology. And so in the end, the goal when it comes to digital accessibility is making your site accessible to the assistive technologies that the user already has and is already using.
And we know that obviously, I mean, AI is going to drive that human interaction again. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Aaron, and please, you don't have to feel like you have to name names or anything, but it's if you had to pick a fight with a bad type of technology, because I think this is, again, it's about human experience, and a lot of the times technology will overshadow at times the human experience just for the sake of technology. Name a technology that probably bothers you the most, that is the most harmful to the human experience, even though, you know, obviously probably created to do good, but instead it didn't.
Yeah. You know, I think any technology that implies buy our tool and embed it on your site or into your app, and we will solve the problem for you, are what I would call a bad tool, a bad technology. There's no way for you to be able to simply embed a little bit of code into your site and have everything on it made perfectly accessible and usable. And it creates this false perception that, oh, you've checked the box in terms of accessibility, so people can come to your site and use it, which they can't, and that that you won't be targeted by accessibility related lawsuits and demand letters, which you will be by having one of these on there. So really, any kind of tool that promises to be a panacea and is promising that just by using our tool and sticking it on there, it's going to solve all of your problems, that I would say is a bad technology. Another one I would say is anything that replicates already existing functionality. So as I mentioned before, I use a screen reader. I use JAWS. I use NVDA. That's how I log into my computer. That's how I do everything. So why would you put a screen reader on your website? It is at best redundant, and it at worst gets in my way and actually makes it harder for me to use. So any type of tool or technology where their claim to fame in terms of accessibility is that they are providing redundant functionality. They're providing high color contrast, or they're providing text to speech, or they're providing magnification. These are all things that are part and parcel of the device and the operating system the user already has. Your site should be working with them without these. And so just by, being told that by using one of these will solve the problem, really, in my mind, makes them a bad technology.
Where do you think that perception comes from? Look, we all know that people involved in these types of technologies are obviously there with all the best of intentions, I think, but is it just a simple misunderstanding of, call it, the market? Or is it tech for the sake of tech? How do they become disconnected from the user in general, not knowing that there's no reason to have that, say, for instance, on a website in this particular case, because people already have that on their computers and use it daily. The redundancy is not necessary.
Yeah, I think it really is multiple factors. There's the scalability point that we talked about earlier. I mean, even if you are just a small to medium-sized business, your website may consist of tens of thousands of individual web pages. And the idea of how am I going to make every single one of these pages accessible is very daunting. Combine that with the concern about litigation, particularly if you're based in the United States, being targeted by an accessibility related lawsuit or demand letter. And on top of that, very powerful marketing, unfortunately, from some of these kind of bad actors in the space. It really creates a scenario where there is a feeling like I need to do something, I need to act now. Here is the quickest, easiest way to do it. They say they're going to solve all my problems, and people just go with that out of fear, and to some extent, a lack of knowledge in the space, because most people don't know what assistive technologies are available on devices. Most people don't know how screen reading software works, and so it's incumbent on accessibility subject matter experts and professionals in this space to be really honest and upfront about the limitations of automated and artificial intelligence scanning tools, and how these devices and assistive technologies actually work.
Okay, so I'm going to now open up the floor to questions, because Aaron, that added a lot of insight, obviously. And I I also want to be respectful of everyone's time. We promised that this would be a 1-hour webinar. We have 15 minutes left. We're with so many people online. We're getting a ton of really great questions. So I'm going to ask this one first. Aaron, and sorry, this goes back to what you were saying as far as, like, you know, not understanding certain technologies that people have out in the world. I'm gonna give you this question. If everyone has assistive technology, why does a company need to also be accessible? There's a question from the listening audience.
Yeah, no,
I mean, to a good point of everything that you just said, right? Is that if you listen to that on the surface of what you just said, it's like, I don't need these tools. I have these tools. Then, okay, well, why do you need to be accessible? But there's obviously way more to it.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a fantastic question. And it's something that people, you know, people who are new to the accessibility space or previously were relying on something like an overlay tool. One of the questions that they ask, and the question is as well, if I use this tool and it puts screen reading functionality on my site, why do I need to be worried about screen reader users beyond that? And, you know, it makes sense when you put it that way, but when you really think about that from the user perspective, and again, accessibility is about people. If every site had its own overlay or its own individual screen reader or its own individual assistive technology, then every time you go to a different website or a different app, now you have to engage with a different tool, a different assistive technology, a different service, and you have to learn how to operate each of those. And it is not an easy thing to learn to do, to operate a particular assistive technology. And so the goal is not to provide your own assistive technology on the website. The goal is to make sure that your website works and is compatible with those assistive technologies that the users already have.
So here's a question for us. I'm gonna give this one to you, just because you have been obviously working in this field for a very long time, and even outside of the AI side of things that you've developed. And maybe this is more of a philosophical question, I'll say it that way, but the person does have a good point, and thank you for asking this question, is that, do you feel that accessibility, whether it's digital or document or other, is still an afterthought for many companies? Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, it's how do you feel about that, given that your years of experience in the field?
Yeah, the answer is yes, it is. And remember when I said that, let us take a step back to understand why we have a problem with scalability and backlog. Now, let's take actually 2 steps back to understand why we don't generate accessible documents from the source, right? There are many reasons, among which are, you know, lack of accessibility education and lack of solutions generating accessible content. Another factor is that many documents are generated by these archaic systems that no one understands anymore, right? And no one wants to touch, or that there are complex scenarios involved in generating these documents. So from experience, I can tell you that we run into many cases with this "don't touch my systems" problem, right? And this leads to the retrofitting solutions becoming more popular than the make accessible from the source solutions.
Okay, I see. So now this actually, so I'm going to throw this one back to Aaron, because this actually kind of dovetails into this. Aaron, okay, on behalf of everyone listening, I'm also going to apologize if we've used terms today that is a little bit of what we refer to as insider baseball. This one is just simply, could you describe what is an overlay tool? Somebody just asked that question. I mean, that is a very good question. Sorry, those are, you know, again, some tech terms that tend to float around in our industry.
Yes, no, it's a fantastic question. And an overlay tool is a somewhat broad term, but generally speaking, an overlay tool is something that is going to directly modify your website to quote unquote make it accessible, or it's going to provide what it claims to be accessibility related features and functionality. So the idea of you install the plugin and then it is modifying your code to quote unquote make it accessible. That is an example of an overlay tool. Or if it's you know, a plugin or a service that you install onto your site that provides high color contrast and screen magnification and functionality like that, those assistive technologies, that is also an example of an overlay tool. So what constitutes an overlay tool can be a little broad. It can go from just something that modifies your existing site, or it could be something that you're embedding into your site that's providing quote unquote additional assistive technologies. I'm saying quote unquote a lot, but that's because they are redundant, and truly the technologies that you already have and that are built into your device are better than these. And the user already knows how to use them, because if they rely on them, they're using them for everything.
So Aaron, here's another one for you, and sorry to put you on the spot with some of these, but because you are obviously the accessibility expert and use assistive technologies simultaneously, does AI or can AI replace assistive technologies like screen readers? That's a good question.
Replace them fully? Maybe. I mean, it's hard to know where things will go, 50, 100 years from now. You can already see some, quote unquote AI voice assistants like Alexa and Siri and whatnot. You are engaging with them fully using speech. So I can use my Echo and go buy an item from Amazon or read my email or anything like that without actually having to use my screen reader. So it's already possible to some extent to use AI to replace the screen reader. But in the end, if I want to be able to go to a website and read a certain part of it really quickly and efficiently, I still do have to use my screen reader for that. I'm sure over time you're going to see the screen reading software and other assistive technologies continue to incorporate AI into them. So you might see things like JAWS having the ability to quickly summarize and organize a page for you, different types of things like that. So I think it will definitely enhance screen readers and replace them in some cases, likely not all.
On a personal note to that, I mean, if you had to give it a percentage split between the current AI that you just have, like in your house, your office, those kind of things, like most people do anyway, right? Is that, right, as you said, I mean, there's, kind of the smart speaker kind of thing is everywhere now. It's the, hey, insert name here, find me a recipe for a good risotto. It's not something that's, out of the question. Like, where do you see your split even at right now as a gauge to, as the evolution continues between AI and then your call it traditional assistive technologies?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier on the Microsoft Seeing AI app, and I can't underscore how many different assistive technologies that has actually managed to replace. Optical character recognition, I used to have a separate device for that. Currency identification, used to have a separate device for that. Image detection used to be something that you'd have to upload an image to like an online service in order to get. And so these are all things that are just available now in the palm of my hand using this AI-powered assistive technology. And so a lot of my previous workflows of reading mail and organizing things in the kitchen and whatnot have really been enhanced and streamlined because of this. So, putting a percentage on it, I mean, there's not a day that goes by where I'm not using these AI-powered tools, multiple times a day. So, I mean, 70-30, something like that. But when it comes down to really being productive, like in my work environment, it is still definitely my screen reader and those more traditional assistive technologies.
Okay, so it's more, call it personal home use that you're seeing, because I mean 70-30 is a pretty big split. That's like almost equal in many ways, right? It's like it's right, careening towards equal, I will say, in that sense. So that's an interesting one. I think we struck a chord, by the way, on overlay tools as well. Okay, this is a dangerous one to ask, I guess, but if overlay tools are so bad and will even get businesses sued, how are these overlay companies not being sued themselves? Ouch.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I can't speak for them in terms of how they are doing this. Some are obviously not based in the United States, but whatever the mechanisms may be, and ultimately, it's your responsibility for your site to be accessible. So if you use one of these tools and then are targeted you're the one who's going to be sued over the inaccessibility of your site, not the overlay tool that you have on it. And most likely in the fine print, these overlay tools have indemnified themselves, say they accept no liability, they make no guarantees, that type of thing. And so really, it's the same conundrum you see with software accessibility and things like higher education. A university purchases a piece of inaccessible software and gets sued over it. The university is the one who's responsible, not the vendor of that software. That's
Gotcha.
tends to be how it goes in the accessibility space.
Going back to the AI scenario itself, Peter, I have a security question for you. In the sense of things like ChatGPT and all these, I'll call it public-facing AI applications and platforms that are available to the general public, are there certain like private versions of this that companies can leverage as well?
Yeah, I think that Samsung story caused some changes to how most of these organizations operate. So I'll just stick to OpenAI and ChatGPT because I'm most familiar with that platform. But yes, there's definitely a private version you can run, which would protect your data. It's going to have some additional costs to set up the infrastructure to do so. But there's definitely those types of options available to you, especially if you're a paid user, especially if they're relying on their APIs.
All right, perfect. Let's see, there's a couple. Which AI programs can I use to tag PDFs? Oh, that's an interesting one. Frost, I'm going to throw that one at you.
Yeah, so as I said, the one that I'm most familiar with is Common Look AI. This is a solution that learns how to tag documents from well-tagged documents. So we create models from well-tagged documents, and the more specific the document is, the more accurate the results are. And also, because I've seen some of the questions, I'll touch on that topic here. Also, when the model is specific, it is able to identify which images are decorative and which ones are real content. So again, the more specific the model, the better the results, the more accurate the results. However, you are able to create or use it with generic models that will give you good results, but the accuracy wouldn't be very high.
For us, if I may challenge you just on one quick one as well, and this just goes back to the, I'll call it insider baseball jargon, just for people, would you just briefly explain, as the AI guru in the room, just what a model is, just so everyone does understand that side of AI, and when they hear the term, modeling and machine learning and all those kinds of things, I think sometimes the terminology can get a little crazy in that sense of just like, wow, this is almost too complex for someone's understanding. That doesn't necessarily work in the tech side of the equation.
Yeah, so models can take different forms. They can be based on text, they can be based on visual appearance, and it's basically you link. For visual appearance, for example, you link how something looks like to how it should be tagged, say in PDF, right? So something that looks like this should be a heading 1. Something that looks like this should be a paragraph, and so on. It can also learn how to tag tables, how to tag lists, and the way it learns is that it goes through multiple documents and basically establishes patterns, right? This is how a paragraph looks like. This is how I tag a list. This is how I tag a table. This is how I divide a table. So when it encounters a similar situation, let's say, then it is able to handle it, right? So and this is why we say, if you say restricted to a certain type of documents, it does better, right? Because if you give it the ability to, or if you say run it through different documents with certain things that look alike but are tagged differently, then it might be a little bit confused. What's worse, of course, is to feed it badly tagged documents. So I mean, it's garbage in, garbage out in this case, right? If you teach it wrong, then it will produce incorrect results.
Perfect.
Mhm.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I know that hour went by really quickly. Obviously, we want to be respectful of everyone's time. The question becomes, how can we help? We can absolutely help you if we're even just talking about AI. Let's just start there, and I'll make this very quick, is that if people are interested in some of the AI scenarios that we discussed today, as far as the real-time application of applying accessibility to documents for your customers, those type of things, our program Common Look AI absolutely does that. We have actually a suite of enterprise solutions that help in all areas of that. As Firas just mentioned too, it's that when it's creating any type of documents, we have software that helps with that. So whether it's design documents or office documents, those kind of things, we have that. As Aaron has been discussing today, from the digital web side of things, we have solutions that can help you there as well. Our auditing team is absolutely amazing at going through websites, and we have live auditors. We have auditors that also use assistive technology, so that again is that we're bringing the human element to this, and as well as things alternate formats, if from Braille to reflowed large print, all of those things, we have that as well. So I highly suggest checking us out at alliant.com. All the questions, by the way, that didn't get answered today, we will be answering these. People will be reaching out to you via email with the answers. And if you come up with other questions, if you're anything like I am, I go to webinars and I think of the best questions 20 minutes after it's done. So you're not being left in the lurch on this one. Everyone will be receiving a link to the recording of this webinar. On that page, when you get there, once you receive the link, there will be a questions form that you can still ask questions and interact with our accessibility experts as well. So please don't think that this is the end. It's actually just the beginning of hopefully a lot of really great conversations around AI, accessibility in general, and the reason that GAD exists. And thank you so much for celebrating GAD with us today as Alliant, our first time as that brand, I will say. And yeah, everyone, thank you for joining us. If you have any other questions, please give us a call, toll free at 1-800-563-0668. Our international number, 613-236-0866. Or just info@alliant.com. And like I said, our experts are here for you. We're willing to answer any questions, have any conversations. And it has been a pleasure as always. We look forward to the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.